So yeah, it's going to be intimate, this one, because it's it's aimed at potential new customers who haven't yet subscribed. So just to give you a bit of background, we do regular webinars on the updates that we've made, and they're specific for we do those for existing customers, and then every now and then we have a bit of a one for people who are potentially interested. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share screen. Okay, so we're just going to talk about what it is, what the benchmarking service is. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of some of the recent updates that we've made and some of the main reports that we use. I'm going to talk about some further improvements that we've got in the pipeline. I'll also talk about some new services that we've got to offer. Okay. So what is it? So in short, we take lots of government data from all over the place, from MHCLG, from DFE, from the Care Quality Commission, Ofsted, and all sorts of different data sets, and we bring them together into a suite of Power BI reports, which enables you to compare how how your council is doing against others in terms of comparisons against class, comparisons against SIPFA, Stat Neighbours, and bespoke user groups and all that kind of thing. And we try and do it in a pretty common and easy to use user interface, where we'll look at things like how things have changed over time, how things are this year in comparison to a cost per head, all that kind of thing, how it's changed over time. So the best way to outline it is to show you on screen, which I will do. But these are the types of data set which we have. So we have the local outcomes framework. So that is basically sort of performance metrics associated with different service types. So we'll have a look at that report, but that includes a time series and a ranking and are things getting better or worse. We use a lot of the revenue outturn and revenue and RA budget data. So again, we can look at we've got, is spend going up or down over time by different service types. We do cost per head comparisons. We compare against the index of multiple deprivation and things. So we get lots of data together being viewed in easy to consume reports. We also have things like core spending power. So what's your core spending power this year? How's it changed since last? What's it going to be over the course of the next couple of years? How does that rank in comparison to others? How does it compare against, again, the index of multiple deprivation? We do the council tax band D comparisons and council tax per head comparisons. In that report, we also incorporate the local council tax reduction scheme claimant data. We have a report which looks at business rates growth above baseline and how that compares on a per head basis across different councils. We have one which looks at borrowing and investments. So that's the amount of external borrowing each council has, what that is on a per head basis, the amount of investments it has, and again what that is on a per head basis and how that compares. We also look at reserves. We also have specific reports on sales fees and charges. Then in terms of service related specific reports, we take the Children's Social Care 251 data, which is pretty similar to the RO finance data, but it goes to an extra level of granularity. So we have a specific report that looks at that, but it's doing the same kind of thing. It's looking at it on a cost per head basis. And it also matches that with Ofsted inspection outcomes, local outcomes framework outcomes, children looked after numbers, and others. Then we also have a report on children's social care workforce. We have a similar type of report, but it's looking at adult social care and CQC inspections as well. We have a report that looks at waste management costs and DEFRA waste performance in terms of this is the amount of tonnes that have been disposed of, this is the amount of the cost per tonne, this is the the recycling rates and others. And we've also got a report on highways and another on dedicated schools grant balances. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll do a bit of a demo of the service. Because there aren't many of us today, if you've got questions as we go along, just feel free to ask.
Excuse me, Tommy.
Right. So this is the landing page, which can be got to just by typing in Pixel financial benchmarking, or you can be got to through the benchmarking site. And what it has on it is it's basically has all those reports which I was just talking about. So we've got local outcomes, got like a summary report which will look at revenue outturn, core spending power, population related data. So each of these is basically a tile, but it's a link to a Power BI report. And before we go into there, we also have a user navigation guide on here. We have an update log. So this gives us a record of all the recent improvements that we've made. And we also have an archive, which has got some prior versions of the reports, just in case there's a number that you need to get back to, because some of the data has changed, for example. So I'm just going to have a quick look at this update, an improvement log first. So on here, it basically just tells you the updates that we've done in the last month. So in June, for example, we've incorporated the local outcomes framework data. In June, we've also added in all of the more recent CQC inspection data. In June, we've also added in the data associated with borrowing investments up to the end of the financial year. So this is basically our way of communicating what's happened between last time and this time. We also put on in here links to the webinars that we've done, which cover the improvements that have been made there. So as you can see from here, those are the improvements we made in June. These are those in May, April. That was the last time we did a webinar. And so, this is important because, it shows the developments that we've been making, but it also helps you as a user understand what's new. We also have in here some use case examples. So this is like where the benchmarking data is being used and where it's been useful. In here, we have all of the data sources as well. So it's like the local outcomes framework comes from LG&4, Department of Transport data comes from there, and so on. So that's fairly extensive, but that's because we've got lots of data sets that are all being brought into one model. Okay, so what we're going to do now is look at some of the key reports. So we're going to spend 5 minutes just looking at the local outcomes framework. It doesn't really have financial information in it, but it has sort of service performance metrics in. And we incorporate that, so we've got like a rounded view of service cost and performance ultimately. But we'll start with that one. Yeah, so clicking into the tile opens up a session of Power BI, and it would automatically be linked to your council. So mine is not linked to a specific council, so I've got to type them in, but yours would find your email and it would populate with your local authority, but I'm going to have to type it in. I think today we're going to use, I think we've got someone from Oldham on the call, so we're going to use Oldham as an example. Okay, so I've popped out and I've gone into Oldham, and this sort of data has appeared. And for this example, we're gonna compare Oldham against other metropolitan districts. But if we wanted to, we could also compare against regions or other comparison groups like SIPFSTAT neighbours. But for now, we're going to click onto Metropolitan District Councils. I'm going to close this for now. What that does is it's got all the different metrics on, and it tells us what the value is associated with that metric, where it ranks in relation to the cohort, whether it's good or not, the quartile it sits in, and then the most recent data. So for this one, we'll just click on to, let's look at new dwellings. So I've pointed and clicked at the word % of new dwellings. So we can see that it's got a value of 0.4. a rank of 16 out of 36. The higher the value, the better. So again, it's been put into a quartile, and that's the most recent data. On the right hand side, what's appeared is it's a bit like a league table. So it's got Oldham there, the rank there is 0.4. So 0.4 is the percent of new dwellings, and that ranks 15. So if you're like, okay, well, that's okay, but I'm not entirely sure what percent of new dwellings, what is the definition of that? We can click in onto this button here. That'll take you through to an LG Inform place where it's got the definition. Tells you the polarity, is good, tells you when the data was last updated, and then it's got our 0.4 there. Okay. Then on there, if we click, so it gives you the definition, and also we can take comfort that it reconciles to the data. And then if we click in here for details, it will open that. Again, you've got the league table down the side. It's got the same kind of information shown graphically. Tells in the quartile, and yeah, so this kind of thing might be useful if you're wanting to take a snip of it to incorporate into a report. And then if we click onto Timeline, then that'll tell you as how it's been changing over time. Okay. So there's all sorts of different metrics covering different service types, and we can limit those. So if I said, okay, we're just interested in adult social care related ones. So if we were looking at Oldham's adult social care, we could see that these are the different metrics. And this is the quartiles in, so we see where it's seemingly doing well and where it's seemingly not doing quite so well. So I suppose the idea behind that is if you identify areas that are not going quite so well, then that can be targeted to be remedied. There's also some in here which will have a direct impact on cost, which we'll come to look at in a bit more detail. So on here, we have things like the permanent care home admissions in the year 18 to 64-year-olds per 100,000. Okay, if I click on there, so it'll tell us that the permanent care home admissions in Oldham are 21.6 per 100,000 population, which is the 20th highest. So there are other councils which are putting many fewer people into care homes than Oldham, but there's some that are putting even more in. So that would sort of indicate that there's potential scope there for because care home admissions tend to be fairly costly. So there might be scope for different ways of providing services. And then we've also got some quality scores on there. Okay, so that's the local outcomes framework, and I won't dwell on that one because it's not really finance related. But has anyone got any questions on that before I move on? Nope. Okay. Right then. So now we're going to look at some of the finance ones. So on here we have LA performance. So if we click into there, okay, so again, I've got to type in Oldham, and I've got to select the class. And on here, what we have is a bit of a summary. So that's Oldham, that's the class that we're comparing to. On the left-hand side here, we have all of the RO data. So these are all of the different RO service types, and that number there is reconciles to the published RO data. So just to assure you of that, so if I go on to this, this data is from the MHCLG site. We've got Oldham. There's basically a spreadsheet which tells you about the cost per different type of service, and we sort of suck all of this information into our model. Okay. So it goes along, but anyway, that's where it comes from. So we have £602 million worth of RO spend across these different categories. Then on the right-hand side, we have the populations. This is the mid-year estimates for 24-25 from the ONS. Those are the population numbers, and those are the, so there's 251,000 people in Oldham. And but if we compare against children's social care, then that cohort is I think it's 0 to 18 population, and adult social care is a 18 plus population. Okay, so if we have the RO values and we have the populations, we can divide one into the other, and it'll tell us what the cost by head of population is for the different types of service. Okay, so children's social care, 1,344. Okay, in here, it also has what the cohort average is. So basically, if you were to take all of the Met Council's populations and all of the Met Council's RO spend and divided it up, then that would be the average per head. So what we can see on here, if we were looking at waste, for example, that's the RO value for Oldham. That's the cost by head of population. So that is ranking the second highest of all Met Councils, and it was 1 the year before. That is the cohort average, and that is the potential saving or additional cost. In this case, it would be potential saving if it were at the average of others. Okay, so that's indicating that Oldham spending somewhere in the region of £6.7 million per year more on waste services than our other alike metropolitan councils. But so we've got some relatively more costly ones, which might warrant some investigation. And then we've got some which are at the lower end. So you've got things like children's social care is that's the RO total for children's social care. And it looks like that's spending less per head of population. And the rank so it's out of 36 Met Councils, but in this year it was in 24-25 it was 24th out of 36. The year before it was 22 out of 36. Okay, so there is, that's the sort of additional cost stroke saving versus the average on here. So overall, it indicates that Oldham is spending slightly less than other Met Councils pro rata to its size. However, there are some service types in here like housing benefit, education services and public health, which are grant funded, and it can be entirely dependent on how many schools are academised, for example, in relation to education services. Or housing benefits can be down to how many people you got in receipt of housing benefit. You get a grant for it anyway, so it's not really useful for comparison purposes. So we've added a filter in here. So you click on there and say exclude grant filtered, and that will do the deduction, and it'll take those services out. So then hopefully you're left with a number of services which are more comparable. It may well be the case that there are further RO service types that you want to take out because there's a specific reason for it. We've had examples where I think it was like Cornwall Council. They have like a fire and rescue service, but most others in their cohort don't. So should you need to, you can click on that button and you can go on to the RO service type. You can select it all, and then you can take out whatever you want to take out. So if I was to take out fire and rescue, we would see that it's now disappeared from here. Okay, so once we've taken those ones out, then overall it looks like in aggregate, Oldham's now spending slightly more than the average of other Met Councils pro rata size. And again, if you're at Oldham, you might then want to either investigate why or try and identify the scope for savings somewhere. Then on here, we also have okay, well, let's say we've got that. Let's say we're going to, if you're spending slightly more in Oldham, then others must be spending slightly less. So we click on there, and that'll take us through and it'll say, okay, well, that's Oldham, that's your population, that's your potential cost or saving per head, and that's where you rank. So of the 36 councils, when we're looking at that cohort of services, it looks like overall Oldham was sort of ranking 13 out of 35. I think at the point of taking the data, I think Birmingham hadn't submitted their RO forms. That's not currently in the data, but when it is, it'll turn out to be 36. Okay, so we're going to go back to this one now. So yeah, let's have a look at adult social care. So you can see there, adult social care for Oldham is looking fairly middle of the packish, slightly lower than other Met councils. But then how's it getting on in terms of its quality? Okay, so there we have the CQC inspection rating. So it's had a recent inspection in February. It scored 67, which was good, and so it's in the the better end of the spectrum. Similarly, children's social care looks like it's relatively low cost. Last had an inspection in May, and that was rated good then too. It's waste services. So that looks like that's relatively expensive. It also has it's part of the waste Greater Manchester Combined Authority for Waste Disposal Authority. And on here, so that's the rank there, and it's got the recycling percentage rates, and then on here we've got the highways and the DFT. Okay, last couple of bits of information on there. We've got the index of multiple deprivation, so it's the 9th highest, most deprived of all upper tier authorities, and yeah, and then that's the overall population. Okay, right. So a couple of things we've added onto here. So from here we can say, okay, we want to know a bit more about adult social care. So I'm going to click into there. And this basically takes us to a report that gives more information specifically about adult social care. So if I click on there. Okay, so this is data derived from the CQC inspection. So we see Oldham, good overall, that's its score, that's its rank out of the cohort of Met councils. And these are areas where it scored well, and these are areas that were requiring improvement. Okay, so again, obviously that's useful in terms of if you're wanting to invest in some areas to make yourselves even better, it would be targeting these areas. Okay, in here, we're going to look at some of the cost per head info in a bit more depth. Okay, so this is the RO data again. So it's just, this is showing that there's the same kind of information we've seen in the last report, but just in an extra level of depth, so you can see how you compare, and we can drill into further levels of granularity. So again, that was Oldham's 104 million. That was the population cohort for over 18s. So it's the same kind of information. Then here we've got a chart as to where Oldham sits in relation to others. So as we mentioned before, it's 20th highest. Now we also have on here, so the lowest is at 443, the highest is at 783, the middle is 568, and that compares against that. So that additional cost saving is basically derived from, if you take the average cost per head for Oldham, you deduct it from the cohort average, and then you multiply it by Oldham's population. That's the value you'd get. Also on here, we've got, this is the rank as it stands in that financial year. The year before it was 27th out of 30. So it's stayed in that sort of 20-ish range. And then here we have the pounds per head of population. Okay, so just to confirm that, if I wanted to change that to 23, 24, we'd have it seeing that that's gone down to 27th. Other things that you can do in there is you can drill down to the next level of granularity. So these are all the RO sub-service categories. So if we want to know about learning disability support, we click on that and it tells us where Oldham sits in relation to that, or mental health. Also on here, you have things like, you can pick your ADAS regions or your SIP for stat neighbours if you want to compare against them instead. Okay, then next page on here, we have the RO cost by service type. So rather than having to wade through all of the different sub-service types to identify where you're high or low cost, you can click onto that. It's already pre-filtered to Oldham and Met Councils. And this is basically the overall additional RO cost or saving. So, and then it's split down by the different subcategories. So the lower the level of granularity you get to, the more scope there is for different councils putting things into different categories. So, do accept that. But, the scope for councils putting something which relates to adult social care into another RO category is probably fairly slim. Okay, and then on this report page, we have something where we, on this one, we've just been incorporating all the model into one. So we do have a little bug that needs amending associated with that. But on here, it has, Oldham, that's the rank, that's the Oldham in terms of its overall summary score from CQC. That's the breakdown about the different subcategories. And on here, we also have the local outcomes framework, but it's not pulling through. But anyway, that'll be remedied. Okay, so we're going to go back now to the so this was all the performance on a page stuff. And the same kind of thinking applies to all of them. So if we were to click in there, we would go and see the children's report. If we were to click in there, we go and see the waste report. And so we're going to come back to a couple of those, but it's the same kind of principles. Okay, so next what we're going to look at is a new report we've added, where we've got LA funding and reserves on a page. So from this, we could conclude that Oldham, for this cohort of services, is pretty middle of the roadish, slightly more expensive than others, but when you take into account the grant ones, it was slightly on the lower side. So, and it also seemed to be that most of the services are performing relatively well. Now, if we look on the LA and reserves on a page section. So again, this provides a summary of lots and lots of different data. So again, we've got Oldham, we've got the class. On here, we have the core spending power per head. So this is all the data from the most recent settlement. So in 24-25, Oldham was getting £1,138 per head. And over the course of the settlement up to 28-29, that got to 1,546. That was the core spending power rank. So Oldham was the 18th highest funded in terms of core spending power of all Met Councils, but over the course of the settlement period, it's going to go up to the 10th highest. So broadly speaking, Oldham has done relatively well out of the settlement in comparison to others. Down on the bottom chart here, what we have is we have that cost per head, the core spending power per head mapped against the index of multiple deprivation. And then this is the sort of the trend line between them. So we can see Oldham, that was its core spending power per head, 1,354 in 26-27. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of confirm this is moving in the right direction. So if I go on to click on here, 24-25, it had that kind of shape, 25-26, 26-27, 27-28. 28, 29. So we notice that sort of scatter is getting closer and closer together, and that's again because the government took into account more strongly the index of multiple deprivation in this settlement than it had done previously. But what we saw with Oldham is it went from being, some way below that average, and it's getting sort of more funding it's getting more funding overall, and it's also moving up the charts in terms of its core spending power. So relatively speaking, you'd be thinking that Oldham's, all else being equal, funding is going to go in a better direction than it's been previously. Okay, so that's core spending power. But on here we've also have other things. We've got we have a council tax per head comparison. So that's Oldham's council tax per head, and that's the rank. So 23 out of 36. So it's at the lower end in terms of council tax per head. However, if you look at the council tax band D, it's actual band D per head it's band D per property. That's its charge, £2,156. So that's at the higher end. So yeah, it must be the case that in Oldham the council tax base is relatively low. So it's got a high council tax band, but it must have a relatively low council tax base, giving a relatively low council tax per head. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail shortly. We also have on here retained business rates per head. So this was before the settlement, but it's like, have councils been retaining lots of growth above a baseline? Where's it sit? So if you had lots of growth, you would have been retaining a lot. If you didn't retain very much, not so much. And so things like the recent settlement would have either been painful for you or not. In this case, I would imagine it's been not painful because you would have had less to lose than others. We also have on here dedicated schools grant balances. So again, we'll look at that in a bit more depth. We have reserves and reserves per head and where Oldham sits. We also have on here borrowing per head and where that is. So it looks like relatively low borrowing. So I say relatively low reserves, relatively low borrowing, and investments per head. It's got relatively high investments in comparison to others. And down here, we've got exceptional financial support. Is it an exceptional financial support? No, it's not. Okay, so again, this is intended as summary to be like, okay, well, where is it that we stand out, or where is it the scope? So let's have a look at, I'm going to click here. So I just pointed that and I'm going to click in there and it'll take me through to the council tax report. So it takes us through to the council tax band D, excluding parish precepts. And again, it would automatically go through to Oldham, but I've got to type it in. Okay, and that's basically just confirming what we saw on the prior page, but with a bit more detail. So you can see that was that was Oldham's band D charge for 26-27. And it is the 9th highest of all Met councils. And you say, okay, and then that is the average council tax band D charge. So if you just take one away from the other and times it by a council tax base, then indicatively you're getting £7 million more as a result of having a higher council tax charge. Bits of other information on here. We've got the Met averages. We've got the percentage changes between last year and this. We've got the council tax base, and we've got the total amount of council tax raised. Okay, so anyway, that report is looking at band D comparisons, and in there you can also bespoke it. So you can say, okay, well, if it's Oldham and I just want to compare against Salford and Rochdale or whatever, I can just type them in and that'll give us those answers. Okay, and then so that was a band D charge comparison. Then we've got council tax per head comparisons. So that's just confirming what we'd seen before, where the council tax per head is relatively low. Okay, and it's been persistently low, as you might expect. Other bits of info in this in the council tax report are we have the LCTS claimant time series. So on here we've got so that is that's the total number of claimants going up to the end of the last financial year. And we've got pensioners and working age. So if I click on working age, so we've got a downward trajectory associated with LCTS claimants. What about pensioners? Also a downward trend. Okay. Then we also have another report on here which is useful for some, where we have council tax band D area charges. So that's including all the parish precepts as well. So in this circumstance, Oldham's at the relatively high end because there's the band D charge associated with it, with the council, with the local authority, but then it's also the billing authority for police, combined authorities, and local preceptors. So overall, it's the fifth highest there. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's go and have a look at yeah, it's the same kind of principles with all of them. Let's have a look at reserves. Okay, so this is overall reserve levels across the country. I'm going to type in Oldham. So that's the shape of reserves. So it looks like Oldham used to have higher levels of reserves than it does currently. Some of that might be a washout from COVID, but it's also got a downward direction of travel. Now, there's lots of other reasons for it. You know, some councils are going into dedicated schools grant deficits to a big extent, and that all sits in the reserve as well. So in here, we do have the reserve type, and we can click into there and say, okay, well, which ones are the unallocated financial reserves? Which ones are the other earmarked reserves? So, okay, we can see a downward trajectory there. What about public health reserves? So, yeah, nothing in terms of public health reserves. Dedicated schools and balances. So we've got looks like we've got a bit of a bit of a minor surplus there up to the end of 24-25. We'll have a look in more detail at DSG in a bit, and then we've got school reserves as well. Okay. And on this report we have the reserves per head. So if we're looking at Oldham, they compare against Met Councils again. So that was its overall reserve levels. That was the reserve levels per head, and that was the ranking. Okay. Okay, so other bits in here we have. So yeah, the idea behind this LA performance one is that you can sort of go in and get a quick snapshot as to where things appear to be going well and where things appear to be going not quite so well, and from there you can then drill into the more detailed reports that are down here. So yeah, we have, you know, the Children's Social Care and Ofsted inspection reports. We have one which looks at children's social care workforce. So that's comparing, you know, how many agency staff you've got, what's the staff turnover for children's social care. So again, ideally you wouldn't have all that many people from agency staff, and ideally you would have a low turnover, because if you don't, then things can, you know, escalate in terms of performance. We've talked the adult social care and CQC inspections. There's one on waste management. So let's have a quick look at that. So I think for Oldham, it looked like waste services were a high cost service in comparison to others. So we're going to click on Oldham, compare against Met Councils again. So we're seeing that that was the RO total, 25 million. From DEFRA related data, that's the amount of tonnage which has been dealt with. So that's giving us a cost per tonne. On here, we also have the population, so we also have the RO cost per head of population as well. Okay, so indicatively, it's looking like Oldham has got a very high cost per tonne, and if that's the average of the cohort. So if you were to take that away from that, multiply it by the tonnages, it's indicating that Oldham's got £9 odd million worth when you're looking at it on a per tonne basis. Then in terms of recycling rates, so it looks like the recycling rates are 43%, so above the average, and then you've got collected household waste per person. But there's a bit more to the story with Oldham, I think, because it's part of the Manchester Combined Authority. So we'll have a look at that in a bit more depth. So this report is looking at waste. This has got some waste spend, and it's also got waste tonnage related data. Okay, so those are the total tonnes that have been collected by Oldham, of which some are sent for recycling and waste not sent for recycling. See, is that changing? Okay, so again, ideally you would be hoping that those tonnages would go up over time, and then the waste tonnes not being recycled, so that's come down from a high in there. Okay, then yeah, we can see on here that a lot of Oldham's spend on waste is going to the Waste Disposal Authority. So that's how its RO says you've got 25 million, 25.6 million of spend, of which 17 odd is going to the Waste Disposal Authority, and then you've got recycling, waste collection, and so on. Okay, on the waste disposal time series, so I don't think, so Oldham wouldn't have one of these because it would be done by the Waste Disposal Authority, but we have that information for all of the councils, so I'm just going to stick in Bradford for now. Just to show, okay, and that's showing Bradford's tonnages, and it's showing the amount which has been incinerated, the amount which has been recycled. So again, got reductions in recycling there, which is of course the concern. Okay, and then we have a specific report on here which looks at Waste Disposal Authority performance. So in Oldham's case, you have a report that's looking at, that's the amount of the net cost of the combined authority, because it's getting all of its income from the local authorities. That's the total tonnes that it's dealing with, and it's got £32 worth of net income across a broad population across the whole of Manchester. And then we have another report on here, which again, it sort of constitutes those councils which are within a waste disposal authority area. So if I click onto them, that'll tell me all of the councils that are in the waste disposal authority with their ROs and so on. Okay, right, so yeah, so yeah, so there's a lot that we've gone through there, but the idea behind it really is to show you that there's there's loads and loads of government data that's out there, but this has all been brought together and incorporated into one, hopefully relatively easy to understand and navigate suite of reports. We have been developing this over the past the past couple of years, and I use it in my work all the time. I use it so I'm the head of finance at Bradford Council, and we use this information for doing things like outlining to members the financial context, the performance of services. We stick it into things like our budget books, so we can see where we're performing well, where we're not performing quite so well. It was especially helpful when we were looking at things like funding and government and lobbying government for changes to funding regimes and so on. Yeah, we've used it to identify cash flow issues, not necessarily with us, but with some of our partners. We've used it to also, well, I can't say cash flow issues. It was the other way around. It was where they have millions and millions and millions of treasury management balances, where they're generating really high levels of interest. Basically, we've managed to get some of that to come our way instead by changing payment terms and so on. Yeah, so all sorts of use cases. It outlines those use cases in the update log, which I showed to start off with. Now, we also have some other developments which are in the pipeline, so I'm going to talk about those. So we have the 26-27 RA data, which is basically the budgets data, has just been published, so we're going to incorporate that. We have the RO data, which is the 3rd edition, has just been published as well, so we're going to incorporate that. The RO data for 25-26 will get published. I think the first cut is in, I think it's in October. So once that's published, we'll incorporate that. We'll shortly be adding on a report about housing and homelessness, which incorporates finance data and the LOF, the Local Outcomes Framework, information associated with sleeping and other homelessness metrics. Similar kind of thing with public health. Similar kind of thing with home to school transport. This is what councils are spending. These are the activity levels. Borrowing and investments. So we have, in fact, I didn't show you that one. I'll show you that one just at the end. We had a borrowing and investments report, which says this is the borrowing per head. This is the investments per head. This is the net debt. This is how you rank. This is the amount of income that's being generated from those investments on a per head basis. We'll be adding in the financing cost of that borrowing, which is also shown in the RO forms shortly. Other developments are we have children's placement numbers, which we're going to be adding in to the children's report, making some further user interface improvements just to make it as easy to navigate as possible. We've started work on a new capital expenditure report, which will take all the capital financing, the capital expenditure over multi-years. So we'll be able to say, okay, well, how much different councils invest in on a per head basis. We're also adding in I showed you the LCTS numbers, that's the local council tax support numbers over time, but there is data in the RO form which says what the cost of that is. So we'll be adding that in shortly. And we're always open to other areas for improvements. So actually quite a lot of the ones that we went through today have come through as a result of users saying, oh yeah, it would be really helpful if you had this, Andrew, can you incorporate this information, kind of thing. So we try and be as responsive as possible to those things. So that's broadly it in terms of the demonstration. The last thing I'll tell you about is that we also provide other services in terms of Power BI training. So this is like if you've got your own models that you want to be created, or if you've got your own developments. I mean, hopefully you can see that we're fairly adept at doing the Power BI related data modeling and report development and all that kind of thing. So we can advise and help build and do projects associated with specific councils' requests also. Just to give you a bit of a flavour, where I work, we use it as on top of our ledger to do the reporting to budget holders. We also do it for things like savings tracking, budget changes, sticking finance information against performance information to get that rounded view as to cost and quality, but specific to our authority. Okay, right. Well, hopefully.
Thank you very much. The demo was very helpful. Lots to feedback and process, but much appreciated.
Okay. So listen, you're from Oldham, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, well, hopefully that information was stuff that you would, you sort of, hopefully some of it was new to you, but also hopefully it's stuff that you sort of, you may recognise, but
yeah, council tax and business rates is my area, so.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. So there we are. Okay. So if anyone wants any further info about it, or you want us to do a specific demo associated with your council only, more than happy to do that. Again, it would be along the lines of that which we've just seen, but it would be for your authority, and just stick it on screen and I'll talk you through it, and we'll have a focus on Bournemouth or Lincolnshire or wherever. Okay, right. Has anyone got any questions? Stevie.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the session. It was really interesting. I think some of the stuff that's really useful in there is the time series analysis, and I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on the likely implications of local government reorganisation, and whether we just expect the newly created authorities to kind of start from year one, or is there any scope to, with a few assumptions and things, kind of break down the data from previous years as well?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. So if you've got the defined boundaries, then you can do things like on the time series where you can say, okay, well, we'll look at Lincolnshire, and then we're going to add in, I don't know, is West Lindsey and East Lindsey, they're in your neck of the woods, aren't they? So we can can add those ones in. So you can say this is the total RO values associated with all of those different councils. And also, if you're just about to merge with some, for example, you can get a bit of an eye on how are they performing, kind of thing. Have they got any issues? Have they got high, low reserve levels? Have they got any, whatever the issue might be? So yes, that is doable on a if the boundaries are the same. If you've got different boundaries where you're breaking them up into non-districts or whatever, then I think, Adrian, you've got some potential info on that, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the thing that I think we're just all waiting for. I mean, we know that 3 counties are going to go on a parish basis, but we just don't know what's going to happen elsewhere. I mean, we're waiting now for news there of what ministers are going to decide. But to be honest, I think all that's so much up in the air, because of all the political change of prime minister, probably change of secretary of state. So it does look like, my guess is a lot of those decisions will be delayed and possibly different from what we might have expected. So it's just that's going to be difficult to kind of predict. But as soon as things don't get distributed on a district basis, they just become extremely hard to disaggregate, and I think that will cause real trouble for going back and looking at previous structures and converting them into the new structure. The more they're split up, it does become harder. I think we can try and do as much as we can to give you that time series, because it's really important. You want to see that time series, but it just becomes a bit harder.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anything from anyone else? Nope. Okay. Well, our hour's just about up anyway, I think. So well timed. So yeah, that's it really. I can, well, yeah, if you'd welcome a recording of the demo, we can send that on to you if you want to share it around colleagues or whatever.
I'll put it on the website, to be honest, Andrew, as soon as we've done.
Okay. Yeah, fine.
We just clip it and then we'll put it on the website. So if you do need to share it with others or review again, it should be on the website for you to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. So I think that's probably about it then.
That's great.
Oh, well, also, if anyone's down at the Public Finance Live conference thing in July, we'll be down there. So come and say hello.
2 weeks today.
2 weeks. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've got a webinar next Wednesday, so we may see you there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, so actually, the one, Steve, you asked about that RO thing. So yeah, there is an RO report which has got the time series, but in there it also compared. So let's say you were looking at Lincolnshire and you've got let's say we were looking at adult social care. You can see your adult social care was this value in 2017 or 2020 or whatever it is, and now it's here. So it's grown by, let's call it 60%. You can then see how your cohort, if yours is growing by 60%, what's the average across your cohort? So if it was like 30%, then like, okay, well, we're having higher growth in Lincolnshire than we would be than our cohort. Again, you might look into that and say it's because we've got a different starting point. You might have started low and now you're moving up, or it might be that you started high and you're getting even higher, kind of thing. So I don't know the answer to it, but it has all that kind of stuff in it. And you can change the start date for whatever pace you want to move from, kind of thing as well.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
lots of
interesting
useful
to see
stuff in
that.
there.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Lovely. Okay. Well, good to see you. Feel free to contact us if you'd like to a further demo or want some further information.
Thank you very much.